Hey, everybody. Welcome to the birthday edition of the Aftermarket Insider. I'm your host, Joe Sebergandio. Thanks for being a part of the big show today. Today is your podcast for May the 12th, 2020. And we've got a great podcast in store for you. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors from Pioneer. You know, Pioneer is the global leader in car electronics, and they're proud supporters of automotive enthusiasts and events everywhere. You know, no matter what you drive, Pioneer has the gear to upgrade your ride and to sound better and to connect with the latest technology like Bluetooth, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and new for 2020, Amazon Alexa. Remember, don't break up with your car, upgrade it. Learn more from our friends at pioneerelectronics.com. Hey, everybody, I hope you're doing well. Things look like they're picking up. We had a soft rollout here in California where folks are getting back to some sense of normalcy. We were out and about ourselves. We had our masks on, but it looks as if the beaches are opening up over here. The golf courses are opening up. I heard from Pro Street legend Matt Hay, and he is attending automotive events in Arizona. We have heard less and less about cancellations, and we've heard more and more about rescheduling and postponements. Now, if you listened to the podcast last week, we gave you some updates on the Hot Rod Power Tour, iconic road tour that travels across the U.S. with hot rodders galore. That event has been postponed from June, which is its typical launch date, and that's going to happen in August. We got some insight from Peter McGillivray over at Bonnier Events, and their St. Paul Street Machine National event still looks as if that's going to be happening. The DuQuoin event will be rescheduled till October, the Street Machine Nationals DuQuoin. And the four-wheel and off-road Jamboree, which is a huge event in Lima, Ohio, will also be rescheduled to the fall. We have had a lot of folks talk recently about, and I've read a lot of online announcements about SEMA going full speed ahead. And with that said, we're hopeful that we'll have Tom Gattuso come back to the podcast towards the end of today's episode to give us a live update on how the SEMA show space selection has taken place and how it's going this year. Tom mentioned that the online space selection for the SEMA show is all going to be done online in light of the epidemic that's happening. And I've heard it's gone very, very well. So we'll find out from Tom what some of the latest movers and shakers are up to for the SEMA show. Once again, I've got a great list of guests that are going to be joining us on the podcast. We're going to start off the podcast with a gentleman who I've had a chance to work with for well over a couple decades. Guy's name is Kevin Oeste. Many of you know him and have worked with him back at his days at Peterson Publishing Company. Kevin had blossomed into the TV guy. In a world of traditionally print, television was new for us, and Hot Rod TV was something that really Kevin had an intimate role in. And Kevin has taken full advantage of that experience and is now left the West Coast, returned back to his roots, and he's there with his beautiful wife, Kelly, and they have V8 Restorations, which is a very, very popular muscle car restoration shop. You have to check out his social media platforms to get some inside information. But Kevin, in addition to being a true automotive guy, is a builder, and he's also very crafty behind the scenes with his television accolades and talents. And Kevin has continued to grow, and many of you know him through what he does at the SEMA show. Taking over a task is one thing, but taking over a task of a legend, and the legend being Dave McClellan, is not an easy one. Kevin absorbed that opportunity and has taken it full speed ahead. He does a great job as the host of the SEMA banquet. He does a great job hosting SEMA Central, a focal point at the SEMA show located in the main lobby. And you know what this guy does like a machine? He interviews everybody and anybody that's in our industry, one right after the other, after the other, after the other. How he keeps it fresh, how he makes those salient points, how he's able to navigate his way through all the scheduling and all the egos and everything else is amazing to me. And we'll find out a little bit about how he's able to do that. I was also fortunate enough to have Kevin join me as the co-host for the SEMA Cruise. And many of you have a chance annually to see, well, at least one of us acting the fool. That would be me. and then other folks giving somewhat insightful information about cars, which is what Kevin does. Kevin and Kelly are going to be part of an upcoming segment for the Aftermarket Insider, and it's a segment that I think is pretty important. It has to do with, especially during these times, finding employment within the automotive aftermarket. And there are tips and tricks, just like there are to building a car. There's a build sheet that you can use. There's experience that can be had. And there's a way that you start a project and the way that you finish it. And we're going to just turn our attention, instead of building a car, we're going to try to build a career path for young folks that want to get into the industry. So without further ado, I'd like to take this opportunity to have Kevin Oeste from V8 Restorations, as well as, I don't know if he's got a few other companies. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin. How you doing, brother?
Doing awesome, Joe. Heck of an intro, and happy birthday to you, my friend.
Emmanuel said the same thing, Kevin. It's like he opened up the podcast like, hey, happy birthday. It's like, it's not my birthday. It's like, well, your wife said it was your birthday. It's like, look, once you get over 60, you don't talk about birthdays. But thanks, Kevin.
Hey, you're still having them. That's the important part.
Yeah, without a doubt, right? I tried to set the stage for the career path segment, but let's just, before we do that, update folks on what's happening with you. I saw, was it a GTO recently on your social media that you were bringing back to life, a blue one, or what's the latest vehicles that are in the shop over there?
Well, that's a great question. We're very fortunate to have a very full shop and a very talented crew of people that are extremely passionate about what they do. And they create some magic vehicles. The GTO that I shared the other day was a restoration we did for a customer. It's a 67 GTO. It went through a complete restoration at our shop, V8 Speed and Resto. And when the car arrived at our shop, it looked like it got dragged out of a lake. I mean, it was just rust from top
Probably
to bottom, really. Yeah, well, it was a Chicago car, and you know, the Midwest is not kind to old cars. So what we found was that, you know, by working with key companies, OPGI, and a lot of others, we were able to replace most of the sheet metal on the car and bring it back to its former glory and take it a few clicks past that. And the car ended up going to the Muscle Car and Corvette National Show in Chicago and scoring 996 out of 1,000 points, I believe. So, I mean, it was just a tremendous victory for the car, for the owner, for our team. And it's a beautiful shade of blue. And yesterday was Blue Monday. So we shared that one on social. So thanks for noticing that car. It was very cool.
You couldn't not notice it, Kevin, like many of the cars that I've seen on your posts. What is it about the customer that is attracted to your shop? Why do you think the guy knocks on your door, Kevin?
Well, I mean, I think to me, the most important part of restoring cars is kind of bringing that family member, you know, back into something that they can use again. You know, most of the cars that we work on are cars that are integral to somebody's history. It might have been their dad's car. It might have been something that the family member had, or a car they've always wanted. You know, we're not the shop that you take a car to and paint it red and flip it. These are cars that our team really is passionate about. They like to learn about the owners and get the story of the car, and then infuse all that back into the restoration. So I think a big part of it is the attention to detail. Customers really appreciate working with us and knowing that we're going to shoot thousands of photos of the car along the way. So you can be anywhere in the world and follow along. There's other aspects like working with the administrative team who's, you know, doing everything they can to stay in touch with the customers and keep them up to speed. And some of the cars end up on our video and television properties, our V8 TV show, which is always fun too, to be able to see them, you know, transform in video. But they're all real cars. They're not cars built just for the video. The video follows the car. And the arc was, you know, kind of interesting how this all happened, because as you mentioned, you know, back when you and I used to work together and I was working at Hot Rod, we ended up, Kelly, my wife, and I ended up leaving the West Coast and starting our own television show about restoring cars. And the whole mission was to kind of share that nut and bolt story, not so much the drama, because to me the drama is in the car itself, but more of, you know, kind of the right way to do stuff. So we chose to work with, you know, people that really knew what they were doing. And we aired our first television show that we created called V8 TV, and it aired on a cable satellite channel all over the country, a couple of them. And people would call up and they'd say, hey, I saw you guys build this car. I want one. And one car, the very first car we built was for Royal Purple synthetic oil. It was a SEMA car way back in '07, '06. And from there, people call, they say, hey, I want a car. And today that has grown into our shop where we now have 19 people on staff. We've got, I think, 38 cars in our possession. And we're doing everything from, tune-ups and like fuel injection upgrades and performance upgrades, all the way on up to those complete restorations like that blue GTO. So there's a little something for everybody to be had here. And we have an open door policy, so our customers can come visit anytime they want. We are not a collision shop. A lot of times you hear of restorations that get stalled out because somebody wrecked a new Honda and that needs to get fixed before their car can get worked on in a collision shop. So this is all we do. And again, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of interest and stay relevant and stay working through all this, especially this crazy time now.
How do you juggle so many things, Kevin? I would think just having the shop on its own and knowing that there are so many tentacles to each project, each customer, each open slot that becomes available in the shop, employees, everything else. How do you do that and then be a part of so many of the automotive activities that happen throughout the year, whether it's you're announcing gigs, whether it's you're hosting gigs, because they're almost, once you get to that point of May, it's almost like there's something every month for you. I know that when I leave my small office, I'm a different person. I'm always concerned that I'm missing a call. I'm always concerned there's an email that needs immediate attention that I can't get to. I'm always, I guess, freaking out a little bit when I'm not in the shop, my shop being an office. How do you manage all that when you leave a job that needs so much attention to pursue some of your other activities?
Well, the simple answer is I don't manage that. We have a tremendous team, and Kelly is a big part of that. And we've got Rod, our shop manager, and Joe, a customer relations sales guy, and they're talking to customers all the time, and then the rest of the team of technicians that are doing the work. So there's no way that I could be on top of all this stuff. And again, my wife, Kelly, who's obviously the brains behind this operation, her previous life was working in law firms. And she was a legal assistant in California, in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica, in Chicago. So she understood how those structures worked. And what we really set out to do was apply a very professional structure to a restoration shop. So a lot of times you work with a shop where the guy who's doing the work is the same guy who's answering the door and the same person on the phone. And those are limiting factors. You want the talent to be doing what they do best. And we've searched far and wide to be able to put talented people in all those positions, so that my role was originally, the guy kind of shooting the video and telling the stories. Well, I now have 3 buildings full of stories to tell, and I have a tremendous team of people that we trust and rely on to handle all the things that they're good at. So that's the only way it works, because you're right, I do get out and do the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. We do a show, a weekly, called Muscle Car of the Week, the SEMA events, some of the Bonnier events that you were mentioning before. And there's no way that I could be on top of things in the shop without this team. Absolutely not. But at the same time, I think the exposure in the shop is what allows me to go out and do interviews with any type of person in the automotive industry and have some sort of connection through personal experience, because we're a microcosm for the whole industry inside one building. And consider this. So we have customers who bring us cars. We have the physical process of restoring cars. We are buying parts. We are selling parts. We're shooting video and marketing parts and dealing with manufacturers in and out. So the only thing that we don't do is manufacture. We don't make any parts, but we do all the media, all the promotion, of course, the installation and all the things that go along with that. So the quality control, the customer service, the management, like you're saying, of each individual project. So I get a little bit of everything here, and that allows me to go to the SEMA show, for example, and sit down and have a chat with somebody who is a warehouse distributor or a car builder or anything in between, and still have a little bit of common ground. And honestly, that show is the greatest opportunity for me to learn from them about what we could be doing better here.
Yes, I think delegating, a term that some folks, especially entrepreneurial folks, they like to do everything, maintain that control, whether it's installing the product, putting something on display, everything's got to be done their way. You've been able to delegate, and it seems like it's working well for you. Kevin, in light of the expansion and the number of cars that you've got now in the stable, your customer base is robust, you've got a good team. What's next now? You know, do you get another building? Do you get a bigger staff? Have you found some comfort with what you have now? Is expansion something that everybody should automatically look towards, or do you think there's something to be said about finding a manageable, happy medium, so that you don't find that this, what appears to be a labor of love for you now, turns out to be a job?
Well, that's a great point. And, you know, you mentioned the term delegating. I was never good at delegating. I was horrible at it. I would look at something and say, I can do this far faster than the time it takes me to train you to do it. And it really took Kelly to point out that, no. With the right people in place, you tell them what you need, lay out the expectation, and let them do it. And then they can do that over and over again, and you don't have to, right? So as soon as we put together more of a structure in our business, it allowed me to do what I'm good at instead of putting out fires of other things that I'm not good at. I'm not the best TIG welder in the world, but we've got one that works here, you know, and I'm not the guy who is the best at managing the workflow of the cars, but we've got somebody who is. So to your point, you know, where does everything reach terminal velocity? What's next for us? I have a psychosis, really, where I worry about missing opportunities. And I've talked to people about this before. Yeah, I have a problem with loss, right? I don't want to, we've worked very hard to get where we're at, and I don't want this to ever go backwards. And that doesn't mean that we need to keep growing and growing and growing just for the sake of growing. I think we are a great size now, and it's interesting. It's not that we were looking for a number of people. We were just looking for the right people to do the tasks that are necessary. And within our walls, we do a very diverse portfolio of tasks. We've got full metal shop, body shop, fabrication, paint, mechanics, full interior shop, you know, everything outside of machine work. And all those different departments are staffed by people who are specialists, and they kind of stay in their departments. Now, they do have the ability to cross over if needed, but that dictated the size of the team that we have based on the capacity of our building. So today, I'm not looking necessarily to grow on a size standpoint, but what I like to do every day is get better at what we do every day. So there are always ways to look at a way we do something and work with the team. Every decision we make here is committee. So, you know, we'll bring the team in and have a meeting, the mechanics, for example, and say, hey, you know, looking at the past couple cars and a couple that are coming in, what do we think a better way to do this is? And then we'll write a procedure, which, you know, starts to sound a little bit corporate for a mechanic shop or a restoration shop, but it allows people to understand what's expected of them and know what the goals are so that they can hit them. And when they hit them, they get the gratification, and then they do it better. And that's where we're growing, just getting better and better at everything we do.
You know, listening to you, Kevin, it reminds me of the time that I spent helping a customer from Drive. You know, Drive is your partner in successful garage operations. And I remember having a conversation with you and Kelly about you attending some of Bill's classes there, and you're doing it right. And you mentioned team a lot and how important that is in the grand scheme of things to keep you in a position where you could do some of the things that you've realized are going to be important for you going forward. Let the folks who are back at the shop handle their areas of expertise without any double guessing or second guessing or concerns on your end. What a great relief for you, because you're going to need a lot of that extra time to keep your shop going the way you want it to go. When you are looking to add or complement your team with different employees, I wanted to chat just briefly with you about that because, as you know, we're going to offer a new segment on the Aftermarket Insider, which will help folks that are trying to break into the automotive industry get a build sheet, get some advice from guys like you about how to go about making their way into, how to take that first step, how to make that first point of contact, and what to do and what not to do when folks are looking to pursue a job. Ironically, Kelly had asked me about that when we were at, I believe, the St. Paul Street Machine Nationals back last summer. And I said, you know, it's a good question. I would typically reach out to some local manufacturers that are in the industry and maybe find out what works for them. And, you know, Kelly's a smart gal. I'm sure that she has a certain acumen that she uses when she evaluates talent. And I want to have both of you guys be a part of this segment where we start to talk a little bit about how guys can get involved. Since we talked about a week ago, have you had a little bit of a time to think about maybe how you would like to present this? Obviously, I've got some ideas, but I'd be curious about what you think.
Well, absolutely. And I appreciate you reaching out to Kelly and to I for chatting about this, because that is the most important aspect and asset that any business has, is the people that make it happen. Without them, you don't have anything. And without really being conscious of it in many ways, it turns out that Kelly and I have amassed experiences and some techniques and some maybe advice for people that, you know, might be useful. So one of the things that you had asked was to kind of name what this segment might be. And, you know, we're kind of thinking about it. And, you know, I'm always looking for a play on words, and I'm thinking career, you know, career, something about careers. The word car is in careers. Maybe we focus on, you know, car rears. That didn't sound right. The car rears.
Well, the first part sounded good.
Yeah. So
the second part sounds good too, but
yeah, maybe a little out of context. So what I am kind of calling this at this point is making a count. Making a count. That's what this little segment's going to be, because it's a little bit of an umbrella type term, and it's something that Kelly's dad, you know, always says. Whatever you're going to do, you make a count. And when we're talking about your career, your livelihood, your passion, your way to support yourself and be part of something, it takes everything you have to make it count. And what we're going to discuss is a lot of things that we find people might not be considering when they are career hunting. Most of this applies to the automotive world, but a lot of it applies to any, you know, type of job or career or occupation. So some quick, simple examples that we'll talk about on future segments is a business owner's standpoint of the hiring process, right? What do we look for? I find that a lot of the job websites and resources and resume type services are good at training people to think a certain way, to, you know, go into an interview and say the keywords and whatnot. But I think one thing that they're not considering is to have a successful interview, and this comes from experience. We've interviewed a lot of people over the years and done interviews ourselves. What you really need to do is find out what that company needs and how you can make that happen. You have to find out what you can bring to the table. And the sooner you can get to that point in the interview and let them know that, hey, I know something about your company. I know that you guys do X, Y, Z, and I know that I have this skill set that might fit. Because as a small business owner, when somebody comes into our shop and says, hey, I know you guys want to branch off into the interior shop business, for example, I can sew, I can do fiberglass, I can do steel, I can do all this stuff. I've done it before. Here's how I can help you. That's the person we want to talk to, not necessarily the person that knows all the buzzwords of, you know, the classic trick question of, you know, what's your biggest weakness, and turning it into a strength. And that, I mean, that matters too. But really, let's cut to the chase. Nobody has time anymore to sit there and go through a lot of this stuff. So that's one example of something that we'd like to discuss. There are a few others.
I like the rawness of that and the real world take on it. It echoes and reaffirms making it count. No one wants to really talk to anybody nowadays. Everybody just, you know, everybody wants a plug and go. The stereotypical planned, scheduled interview that was on Tuesday at 9 a.m. and you had, you know, you practice it in front of the mirror. Those days are over. Guys want a quick sense. One of the guys that I have coming on the podcast a little bit later on, Gary Case, is exactly that way. Gary's got no time for a 20-minute sit down. We're going to know in a couple questions, or we're going to hear a couple sentences from you, and you're going to kind of get a sense of things. Where let's leave it with this. Where would you suggest folks looking to get into the industry start their search? That is something I'd be curious about. You don't have to answer it now, but that first step, Kevin, where do you go? Or, hey, before you go anywhere, be prepared. So I'm looking along some of those lines. Obviously, it's going to be your segment and Kelly's segment. I'll jump around if I can too. Another thing that I thought we could have some fun with is taking a look at some of the current jobs that are offered. If you go to SEMA.org, they have in fact, SEMA.org site is a great source for information. People sometimes forget about that site until it's a month before the SEMA show. And then they all go to the semashow.com site. But SEMA.org is there for you constantly. Its job board is one of the things that I've always been curious about. Not so much because I was looking for work as much as I was curious about what was going on. And during the pandemic, there was a dormant time. There weren't a lot of fresh posts. The posts that were on there were back months ago. Now I see that it's come back up and it's bubbling again. So maybe you and I and Kelly, looking at some of those jobs, we'll pull them up and we'll take a look at those. We'll comment a little, because a lot of the jobs aren't necessarily manufacturing or hardcore installation. There's administrative jobs, there's event jobs, there's social media jobs, there's a lot of other jobs in the industry. And the last time I checked, we were populated by a pretty robust group of forward-thinking, let's go, take no prisoners out there. So it really is a great place, this industry, to help get folks involved, especially the young folks. So I'm looking forward to making it count segment. Kevin, did I miss anything, or would you like to finish up with any comments before we get on to our next guest? We're going to be bringing on Gary Case, who is a longstanding friend, former Riddler Award winner. And you know Gary back from the days, Kevin, we spent some time recently in Saudi Arabia. He'll be joining us on the podcast. We've got Clarence coming on shortly with the Barnes Report. And once again, for those of you who may have just joined us, Tom Gattuso from SEMA, Vice President of Events, is going to give us hopefully a live update from the SEMA show space selection. Another update, I apologize. Our scheduled guest for the podcast this morning was interrupted. It was Brad Gerber from NHRA. Brad is really close to joining the podcast. He had a meeting that was called recently. I told him I understood. Another guy that you worked intimately with, Kevin. Anything that maybe we missed, Kev, before we catch you on the next segment?
Not at all, Joe. I mean, I think there's a lot to cover in this segment. And again, we appreciate the opportunity. Kelly has a lot to bring in this space, not only as being an automotive professional, but also a female and her side of all that stuff. And she's really looking forward to joining. You said something in the very beginning, suggesting that I, am walking in the footsteps of Dave McClelland. Those are shoes that nobody can fill, but I'm honored to have the chance to play along in that arena. So appreciate you mentioning Dave. He's a hero and a great friend. And this is a great show. I'm very honored to be a part of it. So thank you, Joe. Looking forward to hearing from Case, Gattuso, and Clarence. And Joe, like from Kelly and I and everybody else, happy birthday again, buddy.
Thank you, Kevin. And as a little gift to you, I reached out to Dave Mack yesterday, and I'm hopeful to have him on the podcast. And if I do,
awesome.
We'll make sure that we have you on here and you have a chance to talk to him directly as well. Okay?
That'd be wonderful. Love him.
All right, Kevin. Best to you, Kevin. Kevin Oeste, the voice of our industry to a large degree, owner of V8 Restoration, Muscle Cars, hosts his own podcast. If you go to an automotive event nationally, you'll see him. Christ, if you go to an event in Saudi Arabia, you'll even see him. So he's Kevin Oeste. He's a great guy. And thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today, Kevin. All right, everybody. Our first guest, Kevin Oeste. Love catching up with him. Folks, once again, this is the Aftermarket Insider podcast. For those of you who have tuned in or liked the page, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're growing. This is our 5th episode of season 1. I mentioned Dave McClellan. I'm also hopeful and looking forward to getting on a few folks that I've had a keen interest. Recently, for some reason, I've been gravitating towards Gigi Carlton and Linda Vaughn, some recent Hall of Famers. I've had some good conversations with Marla Moore, and I look forward to possibly having them on. Kevin mentioned Kelly not only being female, but bringing such a nice, bright perspective to the industry. Those of you who know Linda or Gigi or Marla know that those women and those gals are they're just so fun to talk to and be around, and they're so positive. So I'm looking forward to upcoming episodes of the podcast. Again, I want to thank Pioneer for all their support. All right, with that said, let's get to a guy that everybody is familiar with as well. He is the owner of the best hair in the industry. He's one of the most talented guys that I've had a chance to stumble across. He is the man, the myth, the legend, Clarence Barnes, with the Barnes Report. Clarence, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, brother?
You know what? Thank you so much. And happy birthday, Joe. Happy birthday. I was choked up because coming up after Kevin's a pro, and I was listening, and he brought up some really good points about hiring people, and that's sort of the nexus of what they've got going on at their shop. And wait till you have Kelly on the podcast. Phenomenal.
She's a great gal, isn't she?
Good story about interviewing someone where she took a bunch of brake parts and gave it to the guy and said, "Okay, tell me what's missing." I would have freaked. Unreal, right? You can't pay people to care, and everybody there cares, and I think that's one of the cool secrets they have. Really great people. It was so cool to see Kevin on there. There's a lot of stuff happening. I've been on the phone all week talking to people about different shows and things like that happening. Of course, the Hot Rod Power Tour, that's in play for August. The dates, of course, everybody's talking about that, but there is so much more in the pipeline. We're a month away from, of course, Good Guys, and so far I was talking to Tim Strange. He says, so far, so good. It looks like, they're going to kick things off in Nashville. Jeff Thisted's going to be on that trip later on as they move along to DuQuoin and Columbus, of course, with autocross and all that action. The guys at QA1 are going to be out on that, and also making their way to the Street Machine Nationals, which is going to be another huge show. Of course, QA1 is going to bring out the Mod Series shocks they came out with last year and try to impress everybody. They're really, really great people to see, if you've never got into autocross, some of these events, if you want to figure out how to get entry into it, it's really exciting. And hopefully to see everybody out, just to see everybody out of the house, hanging out in their cars. I know there's a lot of things that these people are dealing with. So there's a lot of variables that we don't know about yet, but so far we can look forward to the four-wheel Jamboree. They've got a couple dates, of course, and every night at the Jamboree, they have monster trucks, which is really exciting. A lot of events. It looks like slowly things are clicking back into play, which is kind of exciting. A lot of the guys out there, we're hearing people talking about building cars for SEMA. Of course, they just announced Diversified. Mike Copeland's going to build a 1948 Chevy. That's in play. A 1948 Chevy truck. He's had in the shop for a little while. This is the year he's going to bring that out. We're also going to see Will Posey has 2 cars almost done. Looks like they're in paint right now. So he's way ahead of schedule. Some of the guys out, we talked to Big 3 Racing, Rick Trunkett, his crew, Rick, Chuck, Bob, Alex, all those guys out there in Ohio. Their biggest problem right now is running into supply chain issues, getting, different parts and things like that. Everybody's got all the business they can use, but they're starting to see supply chain issues, and hopefully that's going to sort out. But I'll tell you, there's no slowing of people getting ready for SEMA and getting ready to go out, do autocross, go to the car shows. I think we're going to see a change from virtual to hopefully reality in a little bit. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Let's face it. UFC just recently put together their first card in quite a while. In fact, it was the only major sporting activity that was taking place in quite a while. And there were no fans in attendance, and it was a little bit different, but there was a spirit behind it. And
right.
I think that event had a trickle effect that'll now be absorbed by some other sport organizations, whether it's baseball, which is now talking about a slow rollout in July. There are some talks like in hockey where they may, like NBA, toss away the season. although those bigger sport arenas seem to either be fully slated towards opening back up or cashing in automotive, without a doubt, everybody is trying to make that happen. There have been some big marquee events. We talked on the recent episode of the podcast about Back to the 50s being canceled. And the thing that's a concern there is that, okay, they canceled their event. Well, the Street Machine Nationals is in the same city, the same venue at a little bit of a later date. And the attitude with Bonnier is like, we're going to try to make this happen.
Right.
So I think the spirit behind it is really what we have an advantage, Clarence. And I was really hoping and expecting to and plan on hearing the same thing from Brad at NHRA, that they do have a plan going forward. You mentioned the supply chain. Is that a good thing because the manufacturers are sending out so much product, they don't have enough of it? Or is it because the manufacturers aren't quite able to keep up with the demand? What are you hearing about that?
I think it's a mix of a bunch of different things. You have some people who are building stuff on site and they become busy, which is good. And then you have some people who have certain components for what they're putting together here in the States that are, built offshore. And then, of course, as those things come together, shipping, if you go, let's say, to buy something on Amazon right now, it says, well, unless it's this, or this, it's no longer the next day. They say, well, you might see it in a few days. Sometimes it arrives earlier. Those lines are getting a little blurry. But I think the most important thing is that these guys are eating. Everybody's still eating. It's tough for so many people, but I think we get to do something that's also our passion. It's not just a job. It's something we love and we do it for free. And, whether it's building, whether it's collecting, whether it's driving, whether it's, standing and telling jokes, we all do it because there are other things we could do. This is what we love. And the cool thing is I'm really picking up an excitement from so many people about that. Not just let me out of the house, but I think people are starting to appreciate the details. They're thinking about their cars. They're thinking about being, what they're going to do. And I think we're going to see a lot of energy. And of course, with the nonstop, with the people at SEMA, I'm sure we're going to hear some details about that coming up.
It's already happened. Last week, there were quite a few social media announcements from major media companies, and it was very positive. SEMA is going forward. The show will go on. There were quotes from Chris Kirsting, and, we had Tom Gattuso on our first podcast, and Tom will be joining us at the end of this podcast to update us on how the space selection has been going. And I heard it's been going great. But when I mention UFC, let's face it, if there's ever a name of a company or an event that has that same excitement, it's SEMA. So look, SEMA could be that beacon of inspiration for all the other event producers and attendees as well. Clarence, thanks for the segment. We'll bounce back. Has your phone been ringing? You've been booking any gigs?
Things have been crazy. One of my clients, just as an add on that, one of my clients is in Vegas, and they have a big share of what's happening over there. And Las Vegas itself has taken, as I'm sure the folks from SEMA will talk about, Tom, in a little bit, has really, really stepped up designing, because you can't just say, hey, we're open. There are real details, scientific details, as well as manipulating millions of people who come in and out of a city. So I think the timing looks good. Vegas is really, really coming on strong as far as figuring out how to get people in, how to get people out, how to manage the traffic that's going to be in Vegas. So I think as a side, benefit, I think this is going to be, SEMA will be at that point where everything's going to work great. They'll be the model for so many different things. And of course, people come from all over the world to that. I think it's going to be sorted out just in time, which is great.
Positive attitude from the SEMA brass. Iconic event that people want to go to. It sounds like you're going to the friggin' Tile Expo. I mean, it's a SEMA show. People, right?
No, this is big. The
fact, Clarence, that by that time, it's May, June, July, August, September, October, literally 5 months. Let's just be hopeful that things change and continue on with what appears to be a positive step with a lot of this slow rollout. We'll have you back on the podcast. Let's see, next week, it'll be the 19th of May. Keep up the good work, Clarence. Beat some of those bushes. Let's find out a little bit more about what's happening. I think we're going to have a ton of fodder that pops up as we continue to be positively focused towards these events. Your hair is looking great. I know that you're in one of the 3 properties you have out there on the East Coast. It looks awesome. Looks like a great place to be hanging out. I hope you're safe, Clarence, and I hope that you're doing well too.
Thank you. You too, man. Have a great birthday today too. I know that's going to happen for you, sir.
Yeah,
Happy birthday.
it started. I started celebrating after last year's birthday.
That's it.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks so much,
today's
Clarence.
the youngest you'll ever be. So live like it, Joe. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
All right, brother. There he is, folks. Clarence Barnes, another popular name, face, and voice in the industry. A great guy to be around. He's out there beating the bushes. He talked about Copeland's new Chevy. My phone rang from Mike. I try to support him as much as I can for all the obvious reasons. And Pioneer Car Audio, my sponsor and a big supporter, has always fed those beasts that Mike built. That last Rampage was the star of the SEMA show. So Mike Copeland, if you're listening, a good shout out to you. I want to give a shout out to a good friend of the industry, Joel Ayers, as well. I want to thank Alex Borla and Elise. I had a chance to catch up with Elise Borla after her husband was on the podcast last week. And Elise gave me some good advice, and she was very supportive, and I love her, and I thank her for that. I mentioned I reached out to Dave Mack. I'm looking at zeroing in on Gigi and Linda Vaughn as future guests of the podcast. And before I get to Tom Gattuso, who's going to join us close to the top of the hour, I want to give myself a little birthday gift today. Over the years that I've been involved in this industry, a few people can tolerate me on somewhat of a regular basis. And one of the guys that has always, I guess, against his better judgment, made time and accepted me for who I am has been a friend of mine for forever. Guy's name is Gary Case. And Gary is a former Riddler Award winner. I'm not sure if he won 1 or 2 times. I lose count. I'm sure he probably does too. Gary is one of the biggest, most genuine car guys that you will ever meet. He is one of the more successful guys in our industry. I remember him starting off, I think, with 10 grand, working on the top of Bob Morris's dealership, if I got the name right, back in Ohio, trying to launch a business. And he turned it into a multi-million-dollar company, Style and Concepts in North Olmsted, Ohio. And Style and Concepts was, without question, the leading manufacturer's representative and places to go to get trucks built and buy parts for this whole burgeoning sport truck scene. And that's where I met Gary. I was the publisher of Sport Truck. And from the first time I met him through talking to him on the phone a half hour ago, it's been a great ride. Gary recently was a big part of the Riyadh Car Festival in Saudi Arabia. Gary had a formidable task, which was to bring in vehicles for auction and for display. And it was a pretty tough task to not only get it done, but also to execute it on site. In addition to what Gary does in the industry, he also is partners with a company called Street Machinery, the Patina Plantation, where he works with Boris from Street Machinery. He has been involved doing quite a few other things on the side, building cars and building houses and running a landscape shop. Let's quit talking. Let's bring him onto the podcast. My good friend, Gary Case. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joe. I know you're tired of it, but happy birthday. I called you earlier today, tried to sing a duet with my son, wishing you a happy birthday. Joe, you look great for 45. I got to tell you, man. You look really good.
Well, if I knew that you were going to be singing on the phone, I would have taken the call. Unfortunately, I was muting my phone, getting ready for the podcast. Gary, you were there for me again today, like you always are when I called you last minute. I wanted to catch up with you on a couple things, and thanks for being a part of it. The biggest thing I want to talk to you about is how you doing. I mean, how are you holding up in the midst of all this?
Everything's great, Joe. Everything's great. Ohio is actually opening up today. The state of Ohio is opening all businesses. So it's a good day in Ohio.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because we couldn't necessarily say that weeks ago. And there was a state of uncertainty that was cloudy at best. Now that it has opened up, what does that mean to you? I mean, I know that you've got the shop going, and I know that you're big on the events, and I know that you had to take a pause throughout all this. What's your spirit now with this opening?
I think everything's good. The people's attitudes are really good in Ohio. As you mentioned, I have a construction company, and we have a landscape material supply business. Actually, that business is the busiest it's been in 31 years. And I think it's because everybody's been at home and they've had time. And, as far as the car business, Boris is in North Dakota right now at just a field full of what an 88-year-old guy owns, over 4,000 patina vehicles. So needless to say, this guy's in seventh heaven.
Have you checked the company bank account?
Well, I haven't heard from him yet. I know he took a little bit of cash, and I haven't heard from him yet for any wire transfers. So I guess that's a good thing. I don't even know how he can do it right now with the way the banks are, but we'll see what's going on. He's dealing with an 88-year-old guy, so who knows what's going on.
Well, give our best to Boris. He keeps us so entertained with the patina plantation and the street machinery, the swap-oramas and everything else. Gary, what you guys have done there at Street Machinery has really been amazing. A lot of it is with these square body Chevy pickup trucks. And you mentioned now that even the trucks that I own, those, what was it? I had a 94 Chevy pickup, but that series of pickup trucks, as well as the square bodies, really starting to be popular with what you like to do, which is what do you affectionately call it? The haircut, the shave, and a trim.
Yeah, right. Shave and a haircut, right. The OBS truck, which stands for old body style, which really pisses me off because that's really the 88 to really 94 truck. So
I don't describing you.
Yeah, that's what they're describing me. Old body style. Those trucks are hot as hell right now. Again, all of the square body stuff, the whole truck market is still on fire, but we're starting to see that 88 and up truck really, really coming on strong right now.
Gary, who is the buyer for that truck? Is it the young guy that grew up wanting that truck that now has the means, or is it his father who is, what's the demo?
The demographic for a pickup truck owner right now is anybody from the early 20s to guys in their 70s. It's crazy. There is no select demographic, Joe. It's across the board.
Well, that's good news then.
It's everybody and everyone.
Unlike the popularity with the huge, big lifted trucks like we see in Las Vegas annually, your scene's a little bit different.
Yeah, we're
kind of like the lowered market. Are there differences in the customers, you think, from the big truck guy to the lowered truck guy?
Yeah, there's a big difference. I gotta be politically correct here. I think the lowered, you got different demographics. You got the four-wheel jamborees, which are the guys with the lifted trucks, and it's a whole different clientele. And then you got the guys that are more into the sport truck, lowered truck market, either ride tech coilovers or air suspension. It's a whole different demographic, but a car guy is a car guy, but we don't see a whole lot of crossover from four-wheel drive guys to lowered and vice versa.
Have you got a sense yet of how active you're going to be at these events this summer, Gary?
Well, I heard earlier today someone talking about Good Guys Nashville. I was talking to Bobby Alloway yesterday, and according to Good Guys, Nashville has been canceled for Good Guys. And Columbus, they're still hoping is going to go, but they don't know for sure. And that's as of yesterday. I'm building another car. I'm building a 47 Ford Woody that I wanted to debut at Good Guys Columbus. I'm still, hot on getting that car done, but we'll see how it shakes out, Joe. If not, I'll just drive the hell out of it.
We talked a little bit about the Power Tour being rescheduled from June to now August. I know Boris is a huge fan and has a lot going on at that show. What's the sense of the Power Tour participation from what you hear?
Well, honestly, when did that come out that they were going to redo it in August? Was that just released?
Yes.
Okay, because Boris
a week
was
ago
actually,
or so.
A week ago?
Yeah.
I know 2 weeks ago he was actually having some interest in him putting his own tour on just because of the following that he has around the country. And he actually had a mutual friend of ours looking at possibly doing a route for, 100 to 150 enthusiasts. So, I don't know if that's going to move forward now that the Hot Rod Power Tour has been announced to run in August. But, Joe, years ago, you and I have done those events back when you were at Peterson. I think you hired me to be like the director of events for that. We've done the East Coast ones, the West Coast ones. We've done a lot of those power tours. So they're a great time, and I hope that they can fulfill and pull it off in August. It'd be great.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. And I think that there's a spirit out there that folks want to make it happen. So those two in tandem should be successful. I have talked to a lot of people who were really bummed out with the potential of it not occurring. So yeah, in the big scheme of things, I hope the event is realized. I hope that it takes place. I think that it moving to August, let's face it, it's hot in June and sticky. And it's probably be a little bit hot and sticky in August. Not really a big concern. Weather-wise, I think we'll be in a good place. And in terms of future events, we talked a little bit about the Street Machine Nationals. It looks like maybe there'll be a little bit of a pause, a couple months, but that's happening. We've got a lot of good things happening, and it looks as if we're in a much better place than we were when we started this podcast a month ago in terms of the spirit of it.
There's definitely there's a lot of pent up demand to get out there.
That too, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. So I think once stuff does start opening up, I think the shit's going to hit the fan and guys are going to be enthusiastic. And, it really could be a good jumpstart for the industry again.
Well, I hope it returns some goodness over there to Street Machine and the Patina Plantation, and folks are coming in there and buying vehicles and getting out there. What's the latest there at Street Machinery, Gary? I know you typically would have like some open houses, and you recently would, invite folks to come down and either buy parts or buy vehicles. Do you have another one slated anytime soon?
Yeah, we usually do those in the fall, Joe. It's called the Intervention.
Okay, the Intervention.
Yeah, the Intervention is
your description of what you told Boris.
Sell some stuff, right? We got it, right? We do that as a big open house. Last year we had an absolute auction. We lost our ass, but we had a good time, and we sold a lot of cars, and we always sell a lot of cars at that event. But this past year we tried the auction. It didn't go quite as well as we were hoping. We had some kind of bad weather, but that looks like that usually is going to take place. It usually happens around October. So I foresee that happening again this year.
And folks,
but, we're still selling a lot of cars. We're still selling a lot of cars. There's a lot going on.
Look, if you're looking for a good vehicle, whether you want one that is in a project state, whether you want one completely built, whether you want one in the middle, you want them to lower it and put on the wheels and you finish it, great. You want to just buy the truck and do it all yourself, great. You want them to build it completely, even better. Check them out, Street Machinery. Ask for Boris, ask for Gary. Gary, look.
No, ask for Boris.
Ask for Boris. I sure asked for Boris. Gary, thank you for joining us on the podcast. Thanks for the update. Thanks for being such a great friend, too. It's great to see you on my birthday.
Joe, love you.
I love you, too, man. All right.
All right, take care.
Gary Case, former Riddler Award. Well, I guess you're never a former Riddler Award winner. You're a Riddler Award winner. Working with Street Machinery, one of the hottest places for your lowered pickup truck or modified or custom truck. Check them out. Also, the Patina Plantation, which is where they so elegantly put together vehicles that have that old style patina look, but underneath, in most cases, they're brand new drive lines. So a lot of good stuff happening over there. Folks, as we finish up the podcast, although I wouldn't necessarily say it's our last guest, he actually was our first guest of the podcast when we launched it. Tom Gattuso, Vice President of Events at SEMA. I had a chance to reach out to Tom because I wanted to just get a sense of how things were going with the SEMA show space selection. And, they took it online this year, and I've heard that it's gone really well. And Tom's always been a really good gauge, not only for the industry, but obviously for what's happening with the SEMA show. So let's see if we can finish up the podcast on another strong note and bring in Tom Gattuso. Tom, are you with us?
Yeah, Joe, I'm here. And hopefully you can hear me here, because Emmanuel didn't give me a chance to mic check. But looks like I'm getting a thumbs up from him, so we're good. But happy birthday, man.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. With these podcasts, and Emmanuel's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 of them that he's doing. It is a little bit of a challenge, and we may even be experiencing one now. The beauty of these podcasts is that when we tape them, although we do have a group of folks that like to watch the live filming, most of the eyeballs are when we edit it and put it back up on our site. So for those of you who are listening now, thank you. For those of you who will be watching it afterwards, we hope that you're enjoying it. Tom, how are things going? Thanks for making some time for us.
Yeah, things are going great. We're 7 days into our space draw. So we started on May the 4th, and we systematically call people based on their seniority. We started this year with 55 points and worked our way down hall by hall. So very methodically, we're going through the halls, and we're booking. The way we do it, we go all the way down to 3 years of seniority, and then we call all the 0, 1, and 2 year people kind of at the same time, hall by hall. So it's going really well. We finished Central Hall early last week. We went into North Hall. We actually just made a transition right before this call, where we completed down to 3 years in Upper South, which is trucks, business services, and power sports. And we just started on wheels and tires. The cool thing, though, is you can watch the floor plan online as it develops. We are pretty transparent with everything. There's a delay of 15 minutes because we need to be able to have people pick their space. But as soon as we can, we update the floor plan, and you can watch it fill in as we go.
It's always been such a sense of relief for those callers and those exhibitors when they have secured their booth at the SEMA show. You sense it. I had the opportunity to participate in some of those in the past, and I heard it myself, but it was such a great feeling when somebody's like, great. It's like, wow. Is it not so much a load that was lifted off their back, but there's a sense of relief, and there's a sense of, okay, this is the official firing gun. The race has started. Are you getting a lot of that still?
It's a mix, and obviously because the environment we're in, but there's a lot of, like you said, pent up relief once they've got their spot and they know they've got something they can plan for. So it's definitely an interesting year. And we've always had a theory here at SEMA that the SEMA show really is just a reflection or a mirror of the industry. And people ask me what I thought about the support that we have right now. And for me, it's really about it reflecting the industry. And it shows us that people that want to participate in our space allocation, and it's almost 2,000 companies, which is really good. That's a direct reflection of companies wanting to look forward, wanting to figure out how we're going to go into the fourth quarter this year and into 2021 with a plan and kind of set our own trajectory there. So we're really encouraged with what we're seeing, and taking very seriously our role in creating this environment for the industry to have this platform in November.
Tom, were you getting a lot of almost predictable questions relevant to precautions that would be taking place at the show? I just couldn't help but think that wouldn't be a part of maybe some of the natural questions that folks would have.
It's really interesting how facts and rumors are commingled. And we're getting some questions on what we're doing. And I want to share that we're very proactive with what we're doing. I personally have started 2 different work groups where I've reached out to event organizers that are in Las Vegas in the convention center, some before, some after us. And we've got a work group together where we're talking about best practices. There's another one that we've formed here at SEMA that involves stakeholders from Indianapolis and Las Vegas. And we're getting this expert advice, and we're going to have a plan. But there's 2 or 3 other ones that I'm involved with that are industry-wide and in some instances global. So we're not really waiting to see what's going to happen or guessing what we're going to do. We've got a minimum of 5 different groups that we're working with, and we're tuned in with a lot of different associations. So we're going to have a plan. But I want to share a story that just happened the other day. I think it was Friday of last week. I talked to a gentleman who had registered for the show, and this was on Thursday afternoon. And he called to see how his registration was going, and he had some questions. And I talked to him for 10 minutes about what our plans were and how we're working on things. And he called me back the exact next day on Friday. And I had explained to him on Thursday that I was the vice president of events and I'm planning the show, and I'm the lucky guy that gets to lead this outstanding team of event producers. But he called me on Friday and he had a couple questions, and he said, I heard a rumor that the SEMA show is not going to happen. And I said, well, I don't know where you heard that from, because I produced the event. He goes, well, it was a pretty reliable source. So from my perspective, you can imagine it's, if we're not producing a show, I'm going to know. And he elaborated on this rumor, like, oh yeah, I heard it's going to go virtual. So, we're of the mentality where we're taking very seriously our role in this show. It's really just this environment that brings the industry together. We can't emphasize that enough. There's no magic to what we do other than allowing the industry to have these connections, this connection that they make. So that being said, we're taking that very seriously, and we're gonna push forward with this until Nevada tells us we can't, or the convention center tells us we can't. So that's where we're at. There's no plans to have this event go virtual. Registration is up and running and booming. Our exhibitor floor plan is developing as we speak. We are moving forward with this event, and we're excited to what it's going to look like in November.
So are we. So folks, if you would like to, and those of you who have already participated, I'm sure you already know that the opportunity to see the populated SEMA show come to life, go online, check it out. Minimize your reaction to rumors. When your inside source is telling you that the SEMA show is going virtual, yet the guy who runs the show says he hasn't heard about it, you can kind of see how it goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. I too have heard some of those things, Tom. As you know, I also work with some other event organizers, and I reach out to many of the exhibitors. Some of them have reached out to me to tell me the status of our events, which I always find a little bit entertaining. I think the spirit of it, though, is that everybody's just looking for a little bit of a positive affirmation that 2 things are going to happen. We're going to be all right, and that when it's right, it's going to happen. So you are driving that car that's going to take us to that place we want to get to, which is back to some normalcy. I would be remiss to not have checked in with you, because I wanted to get a sense of what was going on there. Sure. Tom, did anybody take their ball and go home? Is there a category, or are there any marquee folks that maybe we would expect to see at the show that, because of this pandemic, have decided to not participate? Because I haven't heard a lot of folks leaving. I've heard that everybody's coming.
Yeah, it hasn't been consistent. Like, there's not a marquee section that's gone or anything like that.
Not international or, okay, great. So that's
not yet. We just don't know. You got to go back to what you know and what's factual. And I've heard rumors that in order to come into the country, you have to be quarantined for 14 days. And you ask the rumor provider where it says that in writing, and they just heard it. We just don't know. So again, we're in these groups, form some of our own and participating in others. We're going to be on the front edge of this, and we're going to provide a really safe environment. It's going to be a different SEMA show this year. There's no doubt, just like it was in 2001, just like it was in 2009, just like it was in 2017. It's going to be different, but it's important that we gather, and it's important that we start to figure out what the trajectory is going to be like for the next year, 3 years, 5 years.
Very well said. Very important to all of us. And I'm looking forward to being there. Tom, is there a one-stop hub that folks should look to navigate their way through some of the skepticism, like if in fact the rumors that they may have to be quarantined or that the show's going virtual? Where do they go for the facts? Is it the SEMA show site?
Yeah, so we're going to be super transparent with all that stuff. They can go to semashow.com or SEMA.org or our e-news publication, and then also our social media. So we're going to be really communicative when we come up with what our definitive plan is going to be. So really just plug into SEMA in general, but semashow.com is a great platform for me and all of our social media. But then on the association side, all the updates we're doing and the state-by-state rollouts and that type of thing, you can find on SEMA.org. And then our publications, our e-news publication and our SEMA News publication are great resources of information as well.
Looking forward to getting, as always, the e-news, which typically I get on Thursday, and always looking forward to get SEMA News as well, especially as we get close to showtime. Tom, thank you for your time. Good to see you as always. I hope to see you in person. Are you guys back at the office yet, or is there a transition plan?
We're looking at June 1.
June 1, like okay.
The rest of LA County, we're waiting for that.
Well, maybe I'll get there to say hi to you right before July the 4th. Always a good time talking to you, and I look forward to really seeing you too, Tom.
Yeah, happy 45th, Joe.
Yeah, I love you, man. I wish. Hey, everybody, thanks for Tom Gattuso joining us. Thanks for the time that you've spent. If you had noticed that maybe there was an issue with the live broadcast, we'll be editing it and posting it on our site as well as our Facebook pages next week. I feel like Jimmy Kimmel and Matt Damon with Brad Gerber. Brad hopefully will be joining us next week. We've tried for the last few weeks. He's been just dealing with some issues that are happening with NHRA, which we all hope are going to be positive announcements, which will come soon. Thank you, Kevin Oeste, for joining us on the podcast from V8 Restorations and Muscle Cars, and obviously Clarence Barnes from the Barnes Report. A big thanks to our friends over at Pioneer Car Electronics and D1 Promotions. Emmanuel, thanks for the great job. I'm going to go stick a candle in a cake and have some fun with Linda and my daughter tonight. I think the big dinner for the birthday is In-N-Out Burger. So that's what you're missing on the home front on this end. I'm Joe Sebergandio from the Aftermarket Insider, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next podcast, which will be May the 19th. Again, presented by Pioneer. Have a good one, everybody, and we'll see you the next time.